Sophia Turner's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her apron, her gaze fixed on the gleaming chandeliers of the Gilded Lily. The grand dining hall was alive with murmured conversations, the faint clinking of glasses, and the gentle hum of a string quartet. Every detail in the restaurant exuded luxury: the perfectly folded linen napkins, the polished silverware, the rich burgundy curtains framing the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Charleston's glittering skyline. Yet, amidst all the opulence, Sophia felt out of place. She wasn't here to bask in the beauty or enjoy the atmosphere. She was here to work, to survive, and though she barely admitted it to herself, to quietly dream. A dream she clung to through every long shift and whispered insult: to become a professional pianist. Music was her lifeline, her sanctuary, and yet, in this world of excess and privilege, it felt like a faraway fantasy. That evening, the restaurant was abuzz. The reason? Leonard Grayson. A name synonymous with power and privilege, Leonard was a billionaire mogul known for his biting wit and a reputation for publicly belittling anyone he deemed unworthy of his attention. Rumors of his cruelty had long preceded him, and now, seated at the best table in the house, he was a commanding presence. His entourage surrounded him, their laughter forced, their smiles tight, as if they knew they were only there to prop up Leonard's ego. Sophia, assigned to his table, couldn't shake the unease building in her chest. She had faced her share of difficult customers, but Leonard exuded an air of entitlement that was suffocating. The moment she approached, she felt the weight of his gaze, cold and dismissive. "Ah, they've sent us the entertainment for the evening," Leonard said, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. His words dripped with mockery, and a few of his companions chuckled nervously, their laughter more of an obligation than amusement. Sophia's hands clenched behind her back, but she forced a smile. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" Leonard leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his glass with exaggerated flair. "I'm just curious," he began, his tone dripping with faux curiosity. "Do you even know what any of this is? Or are you just here to carry the plates?" The room seemed to hold its breath. Nearby tables went silent as customers turned their attention to the unfolding exchange. Sophia could feel the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up her neck, but she refused to let it consume her. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and replied with calm precision. "I'm well versed in the menu, sir," she said, her voice steady. "If you're undecided, I'd recommend the filet mignon. It's paired with a red wine reduction that complements the flavors beautifully." For a moment, Leonard's smirk faltered, but it quickly returned, sharper than before. "Impressive," he drawled. "But let's see if you can actually impress us. I hear there's a piano over there." He gestured lazily to the grand piano in the corner, its lacquered surface gleaming under the soft light. "Why don't you give us a little show? Prove you're more than just a waitress." Sophia froze. His words weren't a request, they were a challenge, one designed to strip her of dignity in front of the entire restaurant. The whispers started again, low and insidious, like the hiss of a storm brewing. Sophia's heart raced. Her instinct was to walk away, to refuse and preserve what little pride she had left. But then she thought of her life, how often she'd been dismissed, diminished, overlooked. She thought of her late mother, who had always told her that her music was a gift, one that could rise above the noise and ugliness of the world. If Leonard wanted to see her fail, she would show him the truth instead. "If that's what you'd like," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. She turned and walked toward the piano, each step heavy with the weight of 100 eyes. She could feel the judgment, the anticipation, the glee of those who expected her to falter. Sitting down at the bench, Sophia closed her eyes and placed her fingers on the keys. For a moment, silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. Then she began to play. Her first notes were hesitant, almost fragile, but they quickly blossomed into a melody so raw and haunting that the room seemed to dissolve. The piece was her own, a composition she had written during one of her lowest moments. It was a story told in music, of pain, perseverance, and a desperate longing for something more. Each note was a testament to the struggles she had endured, to the hope she refused to let go of. As her music filled the space, the room fell silent. Conversation ceased, forks hovered in midair, and even the waitstaff paused to listen. Leonard's smug expression slowly melted away, replaced by something unrecognizable, perhaps shame, perhaps awe. Tears welled in the eyes of some diners, and others leaned forward, drawn into the emotion Sophia poured into every chord. By the time she struck the final note, the room erupted in applause. It was thunderous, genuine, and overwhelming. People stood from their tables clapping and cheering, while others wiped away tears. Sophia stood slowly, her chest heaving as she took in the scene before her. For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't just a server. She was seen, truly seen. She returned to Leonard's table, her head held high. "Shall I take your order now?" she asked, her tone even but laced with quiet defiance. Leonard stared at her, his face pale, his jaw tight. He opened his mouth to speak, but quickly closed it again, unable to find the words. His entourage avoided eye contact, their previous amusement now replaced with discomfort. Finally, Leonard muttered something under his breath and motioned for a server to bring the check. He couldn't leave fast enough. As Sophia turned to walk away, she noticed a man seated near the back of the room. He wasn't clapping, but his intense gaze was fixed on her. Dressed impeccably yet unassuming, he nodded at her, a flicker of admiration in his expression. There was something about him, something that hinted this moment was far from over. What would you have done in Sophia's shoes? Would you have risen to the challenge, or would you have walked away? Let us know in the comments below, and stay tuned for the next chapter of Sophia's story. This is only the beginning. Sophia Turner could still feel the rush of adrenaline coursing through her veins as she cleared the last table for the evening. Her impromptu performance on the piano had been the defining moment of the night, drawing applause, admiration, and even awe from the diners who had once looked at her with indifference. But as the restaurant emptied and the echoes of the final claps faded, the reality of her position hit her like a cold wind. She wasn't a celebrated musician, not yet. She was still just a waitress, a young black woman trying to find her place in a world that often dismissed her before she even had a chance to speak. As the other staff members finished their shifts, she overheard their whispers. The head server, a tall white woman named Claire, smirked as she folded napkins. I mean, she can play, but let's not pretend she's Carnegie Hall material, she said, loud enough for Sophia to hear. Some people don't know their place. Sophia froze, her hands tightening around the edge of the tray she was holding. She glanced at Claire, who didn't bother to hide her condescension, her words dripping with the same dismissive tone Sophia had grown up hearing. It wasn't just about her skills. It was never just about that. It was about who she was, what she looked like, and where society thought she belonged. Later, in the staff lounge, she overheard more. "I don't know why she thought showing off like that was a good idea," said Martin, one of the busboys, shaking his head. "Does she think she's going to get discovered here? It's a restaurant, not some talent show." "She's lucky Leonard didn't completely humiliate her," another server added with a chuckle. "You know how he is. But then again, maybe he felt bad, because—" He trailed off, his words unfinished but painfully clear. Sophia clenched her jaw, the sting of their words cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. It wasn't new. This undercurrent of prejudice that tainted every space she entered, the subtle digs, the coded language, the way people looked at her like she didn't belong. She had fought so hard to rise above it, to keep her head held high, but tonight the weight felt unbearable. When her shift finally ended, she grabbed her coat and stepped out into the cool night air. The streets of Charleston were quiet now, the laughter and clinking glasses from the restaurants replaced by the faint hum of distant traffic. She walked with her head down, her mind replaying the events of the night. The applause, Leonard's stunned silence, the looks of admiration from strangers, all of it felt like a fragile dream that could shatter at any moment. As she turned the corner toward her small apartment, she was startled by a voice behind her. "Sophia!" She spun around to see Michael Carter, the man who had been watching her from the back of the restaurant. He was dressed impeccably, his suit tailored to perfection, but his demeanor was warm, almost disarming. "Sorry to bother you," he said, holding up his hands as if to show he meant no harm. "I just wanted to say, what you did tonight was incredible, truly." Sophia blinked, caught off guard by his sincerity. "Oh, thank you," she said, her voice hesitant. "But I'm just a waitress." "No," Michael said firmly, his eyes locking onto hers. "You're not. You're an artist, and you deserve to be seen as one." His words should have lifted her spirits, but instead they brought tears to her eyes. She turned away, embarrassed by her reaction. "People don't see me like that," she said quietly. "Not really. All they see is someone like me, a waitress, a black girl trying too hard." Michael's expression softened, and he stepped closer, his voice low but insistent. "They're wrong, and I'm going to prove it to you." Before Sophia could respond, he reached into his pocket and handed her a card. "I'm a music producer," he said, "and I don't just throw compliments around for fun. I want to work with you, Sophia. You have something special, and the world needs to hear it." She stared at the card, her fingers trembling as she held it. Michael Carter, executive producer. His credentials were impeccable, his offer genuine. But the doubts in her mind screamed louder than his words. "Why would you do this for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because I see what others refuse to," Michael said simply, "and because someone needs to remind you that your talent, your worth, isn't up for debate." Sophia swallowed hard, the weight of his words settling over her. For so long she had been fighting to prove herself, to rise above the limitations others placed on her. Maybe, just maybe, this was her chance to finally break free. Michael gave her a small nod. "Think about it," he said, stepping back. "And when you're ready, call me. No pressure, no deadlines, just don't let their voices drown out yours." As he walked away, Sophia stood frozen on the sidewalk, the card clutched tightly in her hand. For the first time in what felt like forever, a spark of hope flickered in her chest. Maybe she wasn't just a waitress. Maybe she was more. What would you do if someone gave you the chance of a lifetime? Would you take the leap, or would fear hold you back? Let us know in the comments below. Stay tuned, because Sophia's story is far from over. Sophia spent the next few days in a haze, the business card from Michael Carter weighing heavily in her pocket like a lifeline she wasn't sure she could trust. Every time she thought about calling him, the voices of her co-workers, the patrons, and even strangers echoed in her mind. People like her don't make it. She should stick to waiting tables. She's good, but is she that good? The weight of being dismissed not because of her talent, but because of who she was, her skin, her background, was suffocating. She had felt it her whole life, in the subtle glances, the unspoken judgments, and the outright disdain. Being a black woman in spaces that seemed determined to diminish her was like carrying a burden no one else could see, a constant fight to prove that she belonged. But she had to try. If not now, when? Taking a deep breath, Sophia finally dialed the number on the card. It rang once, twice, and then Michael's warm, reassuring voice answered, "Sophia, I was hoping you'd call." The following week, she found herself walking into Michael's studio. It was a sleek, modern space filled with state-of-the-art equipment, but it was the atmosphere that caught her off guard. Everyone greeted her warmly, as if she were already one of them. It was so unlike the cold, judgmental glare she was used to enduring at the restaurant. Michael met her at the door, his smile genuine. "Welcome. I've been waiting for this moment." Sophia offered a small, hesitant smile. "I'm not sure I belong here," she admitted quietly. "Let me be clear," Michael said, his tone firm but kind. "You don't just belong here, Sophia. This place is incomplete without you." They walked into the recording room, and Michael handed her sheet music. "This is yours now. Let's hear what you've got." As Sophia sat at the grand piano, Her fingers hovered over the keys. Doubts crept in. What if she wasn't good enough? What if they regretted bringing her here? But then she remembered the applause from the restaurant, the look of awe in the patrons' eyes as she played that night. She wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just a black girl fighting to be seen. She was an artist. Her fingers pressed the keys and music poured out of her. It was raw, emotional, a reflection of everything she had endured and everything she hoped to become. By the time she finished, the room was silent. She looked up, expecting polite applause or maybe a simple nod of approval. Instead, Michael and his team stared at her, their expressions a mixture of astonishment and admiration. "You're incredible," Michael said softly, breaking the silence. That was pure magic. For the first time in years, Sophia felt truly seen, not for her skin, her job, or the judgments others had placed on her, but for her talent, her soul. But not everyone was as supportive. As word spread about her new opportunity, Sophia faced backlash from some of her old co-workers and even a few of the regulars at the restaurant. Claire's voice dripped with sarcasm when she spoke about Sophia. "Oh, so she's too good for us now, just because she played a few notes? Please." "She only got this chance because people feel sorry for her," Martin sneered. "It's not like she earned it." Sophia tried to ignore the noise, but it was impossible to drown out. The most painful part was that so much of the criticism was rooted in her being a black woman daring to dream beyond the limitations society imposed on her. They didn't see her ambition as valid, they saw it as audacious. But Michael wasn't going to let her face it alone. One evening, as Sophia shared her frustrations, he leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Sophia, do you know why they're so loud? Because they're afraid. Afraid of what it means when someone like you succeeds. Afraid of the change you represent. But you don't owe them silence. You owe yourself the chance to be everything they said you couldn't be." Those words lit a fire in her. She threw herself into her music, pouring every ounce of pain, joy, and resilience into her work. Weeks turned into months, and Sophia's talent began to garner attention. Local radio stations started playing her songs, and she was invited to perform at events around Charleston. The turning point came one evening when Michael surprised her with news that left her breathless. "Sophia," he said, holding up an envelope, "you've been invited to perform at the Southern Arts Festival." Her heart stopped. The Southern Arts Festival was one of the most prestigious events in the region. Artists from all over the South competed for a chance to showcase their talent. "Me?" she whispered. "But why would they pick me?" "Because you're phenomenal," Michael said simply, "and because the world is finally starting to see it." The night of the festival arrived, and as Sophia stepped onto the stage, she was greeted by a sea of faces. Her hands trembled as she sat at the grand piano, the weight of expectation and fear pressing down on her. She could hear the whispers in the crowd, some curious, others skeptical. A few doubted her because of her skin, as if her talent was somehow diminished by her race. But as her fingers touched the keys, all the doubt, fear, and pain melted away. She played with a ferocity and passion that silenced every whisper, every judgment. The music wasn't just beautiful, it was a declaration, a testament to her journey, her struggles, and her triumph. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, cheering and clapping with an intensity that brought tears to Sophia's eyes. In that moment, she wasn't just a waitress, a black girl trying to break through. She was an artist, a force to be reckoned with. Backstage, Michael met her with a wide grin. "You just proved them all wrong," he said. But for Sophia, it wasn't about proving others wrong anymore. It was about proving to herself that she was worthy, that her dreams were valid. Sophia went on to release her first album, and her story inspired countless others. She became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that no matter how many barriers are placed in your way, talent and determination can break through. As for those who doubted her, some quietly apologized, while others faded into irrelevance. But Sophia didn't dwell on them. She was too busy creating, thriving, and living the life she had always dreamed of. What do you think? Have you ever faced obstacles or judgments because of who you are? How did you rise above it? Let us know in the comments. And remember, your voice, your story, and your dreams matter always. Sophia's life after the Southern Arts Festival was a whirlwind of possibilities she never thought she'd have. The standing ovation that night wasn't just applause, it was validation. Her story spread like wildfire not only through Charleston, but across the country. News outlets covered the young black pianist who had shattered stereotypes and silenced doubters with the power of her music. But with the spotlight came a wave of emotions that Sophia hadn't anticipated. While many celebrated her talent and resilience, others clung to their prejudices, whispering that her rise was a matter of pity rather than merit. Social media comments ranged from praise to venom, and though she tried not to read them, some words pierced her like daggers. "She's good, but let's be real. If she wasn't black, no one would care. She's just a flavor of the month. They'll forget her in no time." Each hateful comment felt like an echo of the voices she'd grown up hearing, telling her she'd never be enough. But Sophia refused to let them dictate her narrative. She leaned on the words Michael Carter had told her that night at the festival. "They're loud because they're afraid." She carried those words like armor, using them to remind herself that she wasn't just playing for the critics. She was playing for herself, for her family, and for every little black girl who looked at her and saw a future where dreams were possible. Months after the festival, Michael called her with an invitation that sent chills down her spine. "Sophia," he began, his voice tinged with excitement, "how would you feel about performing at the National Symphony Hall in Washington, D.C.? Her breath hitched. The National Symphony Hall was a stage reserved for the world's greatest musicians, a place where history was made. "Me?" she whispered. "Are you sure they want me?" Michael chuckled. "Sophia, they don't just want you, they need you. Your story, your music, it's what the world needs right now." The weeks leading up to the performance were grueling. Sophia practiced tirelessly, perfecting every note, every crescendo. She knew the weight of what this moment represented, not just for her career, but for the countless people who had faced the same struggles, the same prejudices, and the same doubts. The night of the performance, as she stood backstage, Sophia felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. She could hear the hum of the audience beyond the curtain, thousands of people waiting to witness her moment. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the hem of her gown, a deep crimson dress that made her feel powerful but vulnerable all at once. "Breathe," Michael said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this." Sophia nodded, taking a deep breath. As the announcer's voice echoed through the hall, she stepped onto the stage, the lights blinding but comforting in their warmth. The grand piano sat in the center, waiting for her. The applause was deafening as she took her seat, but it wasn't until her fingers touched the keys that she felt the world fade away. The piece she played that night was one she had composed herself, a hauntingly beautiful melody inspired by her journey. It carried the weight of every insult she'd endured, every hurdle she'd overcome, and every moment she doubted herself. The notes swelled with pain, hope, and triumph, wrapping the audience in a story they couldn't escape. When the final note hung in the air, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, then two, and then, as if the entire audience had been holding its breath, they erupted into applause. People rose to their feet, tears streaming down their faces as they clapped and cheered. Sophia stood, her own tears threatening to spill as she took a bow. Backstage, a flood of emotions overwhelmed her. She had done it. She had stood on a stage that so many said she'd never reach, and she had left an indelible mark. After the performance, as she greeted the crowd at a small reception, a young girl with cocoa-brown skin and bright eyes approached her hesitantly. "Miss Turner," the girl said, clutching a program in her tiny hands, "I want to play piano like you one day." Sophia knelt to the girl's level, her heart swelling. "You can," she said firmly, her voice filled with conviction. "You can do anything. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The girl beamed, and in that moment, Sophia saw herself. A little girl with big dreams, unsure if the world would ever make space for her. And now, here she was, carving that space not just for herself, but for others. In the following years, Sophia's career flourished. She released albums, toured internationally, and even started a foundation to provide music scholarships for underprivileged children, ensuring that no one with talent and passion would be denied the chance to pursue their dreams. But despite her success, Sophia never forgot where she came from. She made it a point to return to Charleston, to the community that had once doubted her, and give back. Her old restaurant, now under new ownership, had transformed into a community hub, hosting free music nights and offering meals for those in need. Sophia often joined in, playing the piano in the corner, her music filling the space with hope and joy. As she sat at the piano one evening, surrounded by friends and strangers alike, Sophia reflected on her journey. It hadn't been easy, and the scars of the battles she'd fought would always remain. But those scars were a testament to her resilience, her courage, and her unwavering belief that she was worthy of everything the world had tried to deny her. And so, with each note she played, Sophia reminded herself and everyone who listened that dreams don't just belong to the privileged, they belong to anyone brave enough to fight for them. What about you? Have you ever faced obstacles that made you question your worth? How did you rise above them? Let us know in the comments below, and remember, your dreams matter, and so do you. Thank you for watching.